Welcome to Introduction to Business. This lecture will be looking at Chapter 3, Business in a Borderless World. We'll be discussing global marketplace and learning about the different barriers and boundaries for international business. The learning objectives include explore some of the factors within the international trade environment that influence business, assess some of the economic, legal, and political, social, cultural, and technological barriers to international business, specify some of the agreements, alliances, and organizations that may encourage trade across international boundaries, summarize the different levels of organizational involvement in international trade, contrast the two basic strategies used in international business. Let's take a look at the role of international business. International business refers to the buying, selling, and trading of goods and services across the national boundaries. Falling political barriers and new technology are making it possible for more companies to sell their products in new markets. For example, American brands such as McDonald's are becoming increasingly popular in places such as China. Most of the world's population and two-thirds of its total purchasing power are outside the United States. Global marketing requires balancing global brands with the need of local consumers. So why do nations trade? Nations and businesses engage in trade to obtain raw materials and goods that might otherwise be unavailable to them, or that are available elsewhere at a lower price. They also do it to sell surplus materials or goods to acquire funds to buy the goods, services, and ideas its people need. An absolute advantage exists when a country is the only source of an item, the only producer of an item, or the most efficient producer of the item. A comparative advantage occurs when the country specializes in products that it can supply more efficiently or at a lower cost than it can produce other items. As a result, some countries gaining a comparative advantage over the U.S. in the provisions of some services. Many U.S. companies are outsourcing or transferring manufacturing and other tasks to countries where human resource, labor, and supplies are less expensive. Outsourcing has become controversial practice in the United States because many jobs have moved overseas, where those tasks can be accomplished for lower cost. Exporting is the sale of goods and services to a foreign market. Importing is the purchase of goods and services from a foreign source. The U.S. exports more than $2.4 trillion and it imports more than $3.1 trillion. A nation's balance of trade is the difference in value between its exports and its imports. A trade deficit is a negative balance of trade. It's potentially harmful because it can mean the failure of the businesses, the loss of jobs, and a lower standard of living. The United States has had a trade deficit for quite some time. The United States has a trade deficit with China, although its exports to China have been increasing. It has not been sufficient enough to keep up with the increase in imports from China. When a nation exports more goods than it imports, it has a favorable balance of trade, or trade surplus. Until about the 1970s, the United States had a trade surplus due to an abundance of natural resources and the relative efficiency of its manufacturing system. The balance of payments is the difference between the flow of the money into and out of the country. A country's balance of trade, foreign investments, foreign aid, loans, military expenditures, and money spent by tourists compromises its balance of payment. A country with a trade surplus generally has a favorable balance of payments because it's receiving more money from the trade with a foreign country than it is paying out. A completely free international trade seldom exists, and there are numerous challenges to conducting business across international borders. Economic barriers include economic development. When considering doing business abroad, business people need to recognize that they cannot take for granted that other countries offer the same things as found in the United States. Industrial nations are economically advanced countries such as the United States, Japan, Great Britain, and Canada. Less developed countries are less economically advanced than industrialized nations and are characterized by low per capita incomes. LDCs are a huge and growing market for many products, and many companies are realizing the huge profit potential there. A country's level of development is determined by its infrastructure, the physical facilities that support its economic activities. The exchange rate is the ratio at which one nation's currency can be exchanged for another nation's currency. It influences the cost of imports and exports. Devaluation can occur when the government decreases the value of its currency in relation to other currencies. This encourages other nations to buy more of a country's goods and services. Revaluation increases the value of currencies relative to other currencies. This rarely occurs. A company that enters the international marketplace must contend with potentially complex relationships among the different laws of its own nation, international laws, and the laws of the nation which it's trading with. Various trade restrictions imposed on international trade, changing political climates, and different ethical values. The U.S. has many laws governing activities of the U.S. firms engaging in international trade. The Web Commerce Export Act of 1918 exempts U.S. firms from antitrust laws if the firms are acting together to enter international trade. Laws in other countries differ from the U.S. laws, and business people need to be aware of the differences before conducting business there. Some countries have laws limiting the amount of local currency that can be taken out of the country and the amount of currency that can be brought in. Although countries such as China and Vietnam have and enforce their copyright laws, controlling the amount of counterfeit products sold in the country is very challenging. Tariffs and other trade restrictions are part of the country's legal structure. An import tariff is a tax levied by a nation on import goods. A fixed tariff is a specific amount of money levied on each unit of product brought into the country. An ad valorem tariff is based on the value of the item. Countries sometimes levy tariffs for political reasons. Import tariffs are more commonly employed to protect domestic products by raising the price of imported ones. Critics of tariffs argue that their use inhibits free trade and competition. Others believe they are necessary to keep domestic wages high and unemployment low. Exchange controls restrict the amount of currency that can be brought in or sold. A quota limits the number of units of a particular product that can be imported into a country. An embargo prohibits trade in a specific good. It may be established for political, economic, health, or religious reasons. A common reason for setting quotas or tariffs is to prohibit dumping, which is the selling of products for less than it costs to produce them. A company may dump its products because it permits quick entry into a market. The domestic market for firm's product is too small to support an efficient level of production, or because technologically obsolete products are no longer sellable in the country of origin. Dumping is difficult to prove, but even suspicion of dumping may lead to imposition of tariffs or other trade controls, sometimes prompting trade wars. Political barriers. Businesses must consider the political instability of the countries where they want to set up operations. Political unrest may create a hostile or even dangerous environment for the business. Political considerations may lead to formations of a cartel, which is a group of firms or nations that agree to act as a monopoly and not compete with each other to create a competitive advantage in the world's market. Most business people engage in international trade underestimate the importance of social and cultural differences. Differences in spoken and written language may create problems for businesses. Even when words are correctly translated, cultural differences may affect the meaning of the translated words. Differences in body language and personal space may generate uncomfortable feelings and misunderstanding when business people of different countries negotiate with each other. Body language is nonverbal, usually unconscious communication through gestures, postures, and facial expressions. Personal space is a distance at which one person feels comfortable talking to another. Acceptable gestures also vary from culture to culture. Differences in family roles often influence business activities, especially with regards to marketing and advertising to children. The people of other nations have different perceptions of the importance of time. Companies engaged in foreign trade must observe the national and religious holidays of local customs of the host country. Unlike the U.S., most countries use the metric system for measurements, and problems linked to cultural and social differences may be minimized through research. Technological barriers. Lack of technology infrastructures can be viewed as a barrier or as an opportunity. For example, the lack of infrastructures for landlines in places like Africa are creating opportunities for cell phone companies. Changes in technology also bring new challenges and competition. The General Agreement on Tariffs and Trade, originally signed by 23 nations in 1947, provided a forum for tariffs negotiation and a place where international trade problems could be discussed and resolved. The World Trade Organization is an international organization dealing with the rules of trade between nations. The North American Free Trade Agreement went into effect in 1994 and has merged Canada, the United States, and Mexico into one market. NAFTA has eliminated most tariffs and trade restrictions on agricultural and manufactured products among the three countries. It has made it easier for the United States businesses to invest in Mexico and Canada. It provides protection for intellectual property and expands trade by requiring equal treatment of the U.S. firms in both countries. It simplifies country of origin rules, which hinders Japan's use of Mexico as a staging ground for further penetration into the U.S. market. Canada and Mexico are crucial trading partners for the United States. Many U.S. companies have taken advantage of Mexico's low labor costs and proximity to the United States to set up production facilities. Despite its benefits, NAFTA has been controversial, and disputes continue to arise over the implementation of the agreement. Mexicans have been disappointed that the agreement failed to create more jobs. It has been a positive factor for the U.S. firms wishing to engage in international business. The European Union was established in 1958 to promote trade among its members. To facilitate free trade among its members, the EU is working towards standardization of business regulations, import duties, and value-added taxes, elimination of custom checks, and has established standardized currency, the euro, for the use of all members. The long-term goals are to eliminate all trade barriers within the EU, to improve the economic efficiency of the EU nations, and to stimulate economic growth. The European Union has enacted some of the world's strictest laws concerning antitrust issues. It's passed a law giving its Internet users the right to be forgotten, and the European Parliament is encouraging the breakup of Google. The prosperity of the EU has suffered in recent years. Greece, Ireland, and Portugal required steep bailouts from the IMF. Spain and Cyprus have requested bailouts. Greece was forced to default, which negatively impacts other EU nations because it makes them appear riskier as well. Standard & Poor's downgraded the sovereign debt of several EU nations. Germany, however, has largely avoided economic woes plaguing the other countries. It was not downgraded but has maintained high ratings. The Asia-Pacific Economic Cooperation promotes open trade and economic and technical cooperation among its 21 member nations. It differs from other international trade alliances in its commitment to facilitating business and its practice of allowing business and private sectors to participate in a wide range of APEC activities. Despite some of the economic turmoil, companies of APEC have become increasingly competitive and sophisticated in the global business. China has become a manufacturing powerhouse. Less visible is the Pacific Rim nations such as Thailand, Singapore, Vietnam, and Hong Kong. They have all become major manufacturing and financial centers. Association of Southeast Asian Nations is a trade alliance that promotes trade and economic integration among members of the nations in the Southeast Asia. ASEAN's goals include promotion of free trade, peace, and collaboration between its members. In 1993, it began to reduce or phase out tariffs among countries and eliminate non-tariff trade barriers. It does face challenges as a unified trade bloc. Unlike members of the European Union, the economic system of ASEAN members are quite different. Major conflicts have also occurred between member nations. Despite these challenges, it plans to increase economic integration by 2015, but unlike European Union, it will not have common currency or fully free labor flows between member nations. The World Bank, also known as the International Bank for Reconstruction and Development, was established by industrialized nations in 1946 to loan money to underdeveloped and developing countries. The International Monetary Fund was established in 1947 to promote trade among member nations by eliminating trade barriers and fostering financial cooperation. It tries to avoid financial crises and panics by alerting the international community about countries that will not be able to repay their debts. Exporting sometimes takes place through counter trade agreements, which involves bartering products for other products instead of for currency. These arrangements are fairly common in international trade, especially between Western companies and Eastern European nations. An estimate 40% or more of all international trade agreements contain counter-trade provisions. Trading companies buy goods in one country and sell them to buyers in another country. They perform all activities that are required to move products from one country to another. Licensing and franchising. Licensing is a trade agreement in which one company, the licensor, allows another company, the licensee, to use its company name, products, patents, brands, trademarks, raw materials, and/or production processes in exchange for a fee or royalties. Licensing is an attractive alternative to direct investment when political stability of a foreign country is in doubt or when resources are unavailable for direct investment. Licensing is especially advantageous for small manufacturers wanting to launch a well-known brand internationally. Franchising is a form of licensing in which a company The franchisor agrees to provide the franchisee a name, logo, methods of operations, advertisement, products, and other elements associated with the franchisor's business in return for a financial commitment and the agreement to conduct business in accordance to the franchisor's standards of operations. The top two franchises are KFC and McDonald's. McDonald's has started to adapt its menu to appeal to local tastes. So you'll find menu items in different countries or even different locations in the United States that aren't on other countries' menus as well. Licensing and franchising enable a company to enter the international marketplace without spending a large sum of money abroad or transferring personnel to handle overseas operations. If the licensee or franchisee does not maintain high standards of quality, the product's image could be hurt. Contract manufacturing occurs when the foreign company produces a specific volume of the firm's product to a specification and uses the domestic firm's name on the final product. Outsourcing is controversial. Insourcing, when a foreign company transfers the job and business to the United States, is becoming more common. Offshoring is the relocation of business processes by a company or subsidiary in another country. It's different than outsourcing. The company retains control of the process, not subcontracting to a different company. Reasons to offshore include lower wages, skilled laborers, and taking advantage of different time zones. Many countries do not permit direct investment by foreign companies or individuals. A company may also lack sufficient resources or expertise to operate in another country. A joint venture is a partnership between a foreign company and a domestic business or government. A strategic alliance is a partnership formed to create a competitive advantage on a worldwide basis and especially useful in industries where the costs of competing alone are too high for a single company. Direct investment is the ownership of overseas production and marketing facilities. Walmart directly invests in China, but had to allow for unions in order to fit with local culture. Multinational corporations operate on a worldwide scale without significant ties to any one nation or region, and represents the highest level of international business involvement. Many multinational corporations are targeted by anti-globalization activists who contend they increase the gap between rich and poor. They misuse scarce resources, exploit labor in less developed countries, and harm the environment. Many of these multinational corporations originate in the United States. Companies doing business internationally have traditionally used multinational strategies, customizing their products, promotion, and distribution according to the cultural, technological, and regional and national differences. More and more companies are moving from customization strategy to a global strategy, which involves standardizing products for the whole world, as if it were a single entity. Before moving outside their own borders, companies must conduct environmental analysis to evaluate the potential of and problems associated with various markets and to determine which strategy is best for doing business in those markets. Many of the barriers to global trade have fallen. Managers who meet the challenges of creating and implementing effective and sensitive business strategies can be successful. Benchmarking of international best practices can help inform, and being globally aware is essential for today's managers. Once again, thank you so much for listening to this lecture. If you do have any questions, don't hesitate to reach out to me. Thank you.